In this video, I'm going to show you the processes we use for cleaning watch parts. There are two different processes we're going to use for cleaning our watch parts. Most of our parts are going to be run through a watch cleaning machine, and I'm going to introduce the machine in just a moment. But for right now, you can see that I've got the parts arranged in these little wire mesh baskets, which stack up inside the machine's frame. All of our parts are going to be run through this machine with the exception of the balance cock and the balance wheel and the hairspring and the cap jewels and the pallet fork. Those parts are going to be washed by hand. Everything else is going to go through the watch cleaning machine here, and I'll show both processes here in this video. Here's our watch cleaning machine. This is called the Chrono-Clean. It's basically a hand crank version of the rotary machines that professional watchmakers use. The professional machines are motorized, and this one is hand cranked, so you have to turn the crank handle to spin the parts baskets inside. The machine basically consists of this lid that screws onto an ordinary wide mouth mason jar, and you put your chemicals in the mason jars, and you can keep chemicals in extra jars ready to go. So you load the parts into these little baskets, and there's three little thin baskets here that have compartments in them so that you can separate different types of parts. You stack them on top of each other inside this metal frame here, and that attaches to the bottom of the spindle. And then when you're ready then to do your cleaning, you can drop the spindle and the parts baskets into your already prepared mason jar full of chemicals. There are two different chemicals that we use for watch cleaning. The first that I'm going to use is called L&R Extra Fine Watch Cleaning Solution, and this is what actually cleans the parts. The next chemical that we're going to use is also from L&R. It's called L&R Rinse Solution number 3. The purpose of the rinse solution is to basically to wash the cleaning solution off, because you don't want any of the cleaning solution on the parts after they dry. You don't want any residue from it. If you have any residue of that on the parts, it could possibly damage the lubricants that you put on later, because the cleaning solution is designed to break up oils and greases. And so if there's any residue of it on any of the watch parts, when you put your new oil and your new lubricants on the watch, when you're putting it back together, that residue could damage those lubricants, and you could end up with a watch that's not properly lubricated then. And we're going to put it through basically 3 different chemicals actually. There's going to be the first time we're going to run it through the cleaning solution. Then we're going to put it into a jar of the rinse, and then after that we're going to put it into another jar of the rinse just to make sure that everything is totally rinsed off. So it'll go through 2 different rinses plus the cleaning solution, and then after that then we'll dry it. Next we're going to clean our cap jewels and our upper and lower balance jewels, our pallet fork, and our balance wheel and balance cock. And to do that, we're going to clean these by hand instead of using the cleaning machine. And we're going to use a chemical called 1-dip, which is made for watchmaking, and it's made for this purpose. Now this stuff is extremely toxic, so you don't want to breathe it. It smells really bad, but it's also toxic through inhalation, so you don't want to breathe it. Make sure you work in a place that's well ventilated, and wear chemical resistant gloves like I am, because it can absorb through your skin too. I prepared a little jar of it here. This is a little 8-ounce size mason jar, and I've just put in a small amount of it. It's only maybe ½ an inch deep. I'm going to drop the parts into here, and then I'm going to leave them soak in there for a couple minutes. After I put the parts in the 1-dip, I just kind of swish them around a little bit like that for a few minutes, and I leave the lid on while I'm doing this. I just took that off to show you, so you don't breathe this stuff. And then once it's all done, and I've been doing this for a few minutes before I started the video, then we can start cleaning doing the final cleaning of the pieces. You'll need your tweezers, and what we're going to do is reach in and pull out each individual piece and drop them onto a stack of Watchmaker's tissue. I've got like 6 or 7 sheets of it stacked up here. And what we're going to try to do here, for the balance wheel, we're just going to take it out and let it dry, but the end cap jewels are what we're going to work with the paper. So here I have one of the cap jewels. What we're going to do with it is lay it flat side down, because one side of the jewel is curved and the other side is flat. Lay it flat side down on the paper. Put your finger over it with the rubber gloves on, and just push it around on the paper and scrub it like that to polish the surface of it. That removes any residue from the cleaning chemicals and any residual dirt that might still be on it. You want this to be really finely polished and super smooth, so that you'll get real good smooth movement from the parts that work up against it. Once that's been done, then we can transfer it to the parts tray and get the next piece out. Again, we're going to do the same thing. You want to make sure you have the flat side down, which this is the flat side up right now, so I need to flip it over. Okay, flat side down. Scrub it on the paper for a bit. So you get a good, nice, clean, smooth, shiny surface on it. The little tiny balance cap jewels are going to be the hardest because of how small they are. Now we're not going to do this with the balance jewels that are in the metal casing. Those don't need to be polished because the pivots on the balance go through the center of those and don't ride up against the flat surface of them, so we don't need to polish those. We just need to take them out and let them dry. You got to be careful picking up the balance wheel and balance cock. You want to pick them up together because if you just pick up the balance cock and pull it out of there, surface tension on the one dip will hold the balance wheel in place in the liquid, and it will stretch out the spring really bad. So you got to pick them up together and then set them down on your watchmaker's paper, and then you can flip it over and hang it up like that. Then it's okay for the balance wheel to hang down a little bit like that. You just don't want it being stretched out by being stuck to the water or by being stuck to the chemicals. And just hold it like that until it dries. This one dip stuff dries very quickly. It'll evaporate in just a few seconds. And once it's fully dry, then we can put it back in the parts tray. And I'll continue to do this with the rest of the end jewels that I have in here. There's a couple more of them still in the one dip. And then we'll be done with those. They'll be ready to install in the movement then. After this, it'll be time then to clean the rest of the movement parts in our watch cleaning machine. Alright, I've got the watch parts loaded in the baskets in the Chrono-Clean, and I'm just storing it right now in this empty jar until we're ready to get started. We have all of our cleaning chemicals ready in prepared jars. We're going to start out with the cleaner, which is the yellow chemical here. And this works simply by lifting it out of the empty jar and dropping it into the one with the chemicals. Screw the lid on here. And you notice I'm wearing the chemical-proof gloves again. These chemicals, just like the one dip, are very toxic and they can absorb through your skin, so you don't want to get this stuff on you and you don't want to breathe it. So work in a ventilated space and try not to breathe too much when the jars are open. Okay, now that we've got it in here, we're going to give it 5 minutes in this. And during that time, I've got my stopwatch here. I'm going to start. We will crank the handle. And as I turn the handle, the baskets spin inside. Now every 15 seconds, I'm going to reverse direction to give it a little bit more agitation and more turbulence inside so that it'll get the cleaning chemicals moving around the parts better. And I'm watching the time on my digital watch that I've got on my wrist right now. So we're going to continue this for a total of 5 minutes in this chemical before we put it into the next chemical, which will be the first rinse solution. Alright, it's ready to change into the next chemical. I've got 2 jars ready here. I've got an empty jar, and I have the jar with the rinse solution, which is a clear liquid. And this is marked rinse number 1. The other one will be marked rinse number 2. I'm going to take the lid off the rinse jar, and then loosen the Chrono-Clean off the cleaner jar. Lift the chemicals out, or lift the parts out, I mean. Drain off the excess cleaner. Try to get as much off there as you can before we put it into the next thing. I'll put it into this empty jar for right now and put the lid back on the cleaner so we don't breathe too much of this stuff. It smells terrible. Okay, now what the empty jar is for is we want to make sure that there's not very much cleaner still inside the basket, still clinging to parts and whatever. So we're going to use this empty jar to spin off the as much of the excess as we can. And a little bit of cleaner in the bottom, you can see it spun off there. Now that we've done with that, we can loosen this back off. Bring the rinse jar up here. Just drop this into the rinse. Pour out this excess cleaner. Tighten this up, and then we're going to give this 3 minutes. And we're doing this just like the cleaner. Every 15 seconds I'm going to reverse direction. Alright, our 3 minutes is up with the rinse. We're ready for rinse number 2. I'll loosen the lid on it. Unscrew the Chrono-Clean lid off the rinse number 1. Do the same as we did with the cleaner. Take it out and let as much of the excess spill off as we can, so we don't have very much carryover. And then we'll just go ahead and drop it into the rinse number 2. We don't need to spin off the excess between the 2 rinses. Put the lid back on rinse number 1. And make sure I put the right lid on there. They're labeled 1 and 2. Now, tighten this down. And then we can start just like with the first rinse. This is going to be 3 minutes, reversing direction every 15 seconds. Alright, we're done with the rinse solution. This is the second rinse solution, and we're going to use an empty jar to spin off the excess like we did with the cleaning solution. Let as much of the excess drain off as we can. Drop it into the empty jar. Put the lid on the chemicals. Tighten it down and we'll spin off the excess. You can see I'm spinning pretty rapidly to give it a lot of centrifugal force to force all that liquid to spin off there and fly out of the baskets. Now that we're done with that, we are ready to dry the wash parts. And to do that, we're going to use a hairdryer. And we're going to set it to low setting. And just blow this around from different angles. Make sure it dries everything evenly. You don't want to concentrate on one side or another. Get some from below too. Now once I've got most of the outside of it dry, I like to take the baskets off the Chrono-Clean lid because it's hard to get everything clean when you can't reach the top. And also, if we take these out of here, and you have to be careful that they don't fall because then you'll lose all your parts all over the floor. Some moisture gets trapped in the bottom of this little cage that doesn't want to dry if you don't get these out of here. This lets us get more angles on it and get it more thoroughly dry. But you got to be careful not to drop it. And you don't want to get the hairdryer too close. You don't want these things getting too hot because heat can damage some of the parts in the watch. So we're using just low heat and not getting too close to it. Not keeping it in one place, just moving it constantly around. The idea being just to evaporate the chemicals. And the reason we're doing this instead of just letting them air dry is that if these chemicals are just air dried, they'll leave some residue on the parts. And you don't want any residue on your watch parts because these cleaning chemicals, they're basically made to destroy oils and greases in order to clean the watch movement. And so if there's any residue of this stuff on the parts when we put the watch back together and re-lubricate it, those residues will damage the new lubricants because that's what they're designed to do. And we don't want that to happen because the watch won't be properly lubricated. So it's very important to have all the residue blown off with the dryer. That way we can properly lubricate the watch when we put it back together. And it takes maybe 10 minutes or so of drying with the hair dryer before they're all finished. And I think we're at the point now where we can stop. So the next step is going to be just taking the parts back out of these baskets and putting them back into my parts trays. And then after that, we'll go on to the next step in the cleaning process. Because the cleaning's not finished yet, there's more steps. We're going to have to peg the jewel holes in all the parts that have jewels. There's my cat meowing at me, he wants to eat. And then we also need to, we need to peg the jewel holes, and we also need to clean the spindles on all the wheels by sticking them into Pithwood. So we'll show that coming up next. Now that we have the parts out of the cleaning machine, there's 2 more cleaning steps that need to be done before we can start to reassemble the movement. The first is called pithing the pivots, and the pivots are the tips of the spindles on the gears. And we're going to use something called Pithwood, which is these little pieces of very soft wood that are sold for watchmakers to use for this purpose. And basically you're just taking the gears and sticking the spindles into the Pithwood several times, and then flipping it over to the other side and doing the same there. This wood is so soft that it won't bend the pivots, it won't bend the end of the spindles. And so you can do this safely. It's hard for me to do this when I'm trying to look under the camera instead of looking through my loop like I normally do when I'm working on these. You can safely do this without damaging the pivots. And what this does is it just cleans off any excess dirt or gunk that didn't come off in the cleaning process. It kind of polishes the pivots and makes them just a little bit smoother than they were before. And that makes sure that they spin very freely, which means that they won't rob you of any amplitude like they would if they were a little bit dirty. We're going to do this with the center wheel, the third wheel, and the fourth wheel, and also we're going to do it with the escape wheel. Okay, and that's all that's involved in pithing the pivots. It's very easy and very quick to do. Pegging the jewel holes is a way of mechanically cleaning the tiny insides of the little jewel pivots. And to do that, you take a piece of pegwood, which is a thin wooden stick, and you sharpen it using a razor blade or an X-Acto knife to a very fine point that you can stick into the jewel holes. Now, you don't want to sharpen this using something like a pencil sharpener because you don't want the sharpened tip to be round. You want it to have facets on it with flat sides because those facets and the edges of the facets help clean out the gunk that's in the jewel holes. And the way it's done is you stick the peg into, or the sharpened end of the peg into the jewel hole, and you rotate it. And I'm going to show you the process of doing that using a different movement because I have a clip that I made for another video that shows it well, and I'm having a difficult time getting this in here under the camera now without it slipping out of the hole in this movement. This is something that's a lot easier to do when you're looking through an eye loop, and that's how I normally do them when I'm actually working on a movement. So I'm going to show you the other clip real quick so that we can see the actual process for doing it. Once you get the pegwood in the hole, you just rotate it for about 10 seconds or so. Now this process has to be done on every jewel, on every part of the movement that has any jewels. There's going to be jewels on the base plate like we have here. This is the main plate of this movement. There's also going to be jewels in the balance cock. There's going to be jewels on the train bridge. And occasionally some movements have jewels elsewhere too. So anywhere there's a jewel on a movement, you need to peg it. You need to peg the front of the jewel and the back of the jewel both. And every time you stick the piece of wood into a jewel, you have to sharpen it afterwards. You can't do one hole and then move to the next without sharpening it because the wood is very soft, and if you do that, it's going to break off in the holes, and it's a real pain to get it out then. So it's a tedious process. It's a long, tedious, difficult process, but it pays off because it increases your amplitude quite a bit if you have pegged jewel holes. If the jewel holes aren't pegged, any kind of dirt and residual gunk that's in there that the cleaning process in the cleaning machine didn't take out is going to rob you of amplitude. And if it's on the balance jewels, it can affect timekeeping accuracy too. Now that's all there is to cleaning the movement. Once we've got all this done, once we've run the parts through the cleaning machine, once we've done the parts that have to be cleaned in the one dip done, once we have the pegging the jewel holes done, once we have the pithing the pivots done, we're ready to start relubricating and reassembling the movement.